Good morning. Welcome to part 4 of our reading and studying the Bible together. We are looking at and wading through some of the thoughts related to Job. We started Job chapter 1. I'm Pastor Lou Kilgore here in the building of the High Mountain Presbyterian Church, and in your home or wherever you are, glad to be here with you today to contemplate, have deep conversations. A few years ago, there was a study that was done. There's always a study being done about everything, but there was a study being done about what real value congregations and churches offer to people in their lives. That may seem like an easy thing to answer, but it's not always. And one of the things that came back was an overwhelming number of people look for places where they can have deep conversations. Conversations about things that matter. Conversations that maybe they don't even feel necessarily equipped to participate in, but yet the questions are looming. Why do we do what we do? What's the meaning of life? How do we deal with hardship in life? And to handle these things instead of just having them be internal kinds of things. And we have hello, how are you? I'm doing fine, and we talk about important things, but they're not deep things. So the congregation of the High Mountain Presbyterian Church offers these online Bible studies for a lot of purposes. One is to illustrate that for a theologically trained pastor like me, who has studied Greek and Hebrew and uses historical critical method in order to interpret the text, for you to have a sample of what it means to hear the way a pastor trained like I am reads the Bible. There are other ways to read it. You can read it by just picking it up and assuming that whatever meaning you get out of it when you read it is what it means. And that's sort of the devotional Bible study way of just pick the Bible up, read it, see what you think it says to you, and then assume that you've listened to what it said, or that you understood what it said. If it's helpful, why look twice? The historical critical method says there's a very important task that should be given to asking, what did the author mean? What did the community mean that held these texts in reverence? And in order to discern that, in order to get to that, to know what they're talking about, and the book of Job is an ancient writing. And if you want to know what the writers meant or said or believed, it's a little more than just to pick it up and read it. So that's what we do. That's what we do. That's what I do here in this hour-long invitation to read and study the Bible, to hold up the things that are held out, to ask, do we understand it? Have we really heard it? And to compare it, not in a deep PhD level kind of way, but at least beyond the surface, to engage in what it might mean, and then what it might mean for us, and what it might mean for us in how we live our lives. So, we have been handling one of the most difficult theological texts, not in terms of hearing and reading what the authors are saying, but in comparing what they're saying with what many of us carry around in the world as what I would call our worldview. Questions like, why do bad things happen? In a world made and created by God, why do bad things happen? Job is a study, a tour de force, as they say. Job is a study in various answers to that question. Job's friends believe that very, very terrible things are happening to Job and to his family because hidden deep inside of him somewhere, there is this callousness of his life, which is a lack of faith in God. And that God is trying to purify that, to get rid of it, by bringing all kinds of difficulty into Job's life, suffering, not just into his life, but I mean his wife dies, his kids die, the animals die, he loses his farm, he has skin disease, which is causing him such pain that he sits in the dirt and throws dirt on himself in order to find some relief. Job's friends, who represent, I would say, a kind of common view of the world around him, believe and reiterate to him over and over again that if he would just be honest and confess the cell of his lack of faith in God, or his sin, if you will, the part that is a separation where he has withdrawn himself from God's care, even though it's secret and it's deep and it's dark, Job's friends are confident that that's why he's suffering. Job, on the other hand, stands on a platform of saying, no, my suffering is terrible, but that's not where it comes from. I am suffering, yes, and my family has died, yes, and things are terrible, yes, but my faith in God has never wavered. In the beginning of the book, he's introduced as a man who has faith beyond belief. He has more faith than anybody, and that's from the narrator. And Job believes that. He has a very strong sense of his, to use our common language, his relationship to God. He has no doubt of it. And he has enough faith that his faith can be imputed or carried over to other people. His faith is so strong, he covers the sins of his family. His friends don't buy it. They don't buy it. And so we've been reading and listening to his friend, Eliphaz, who has brought the issue right to him. And then we've listened now, today, in chapter 6. I keep saying we're going to read as far as we can. I'm going to keep going as long as it feels like it's productive. There is, Job has 40, no, more. Job has 41, 42 chapters. And it is extremely repetitive in terms of these issues. They're big issues, so it's worth holding them up and turning them around and seeing all the facets of them. But it can get very discouraging if you're looking and you just keep hearing, yes, you'll have this. These things are happening. And I'm not going to go into it a long way today, but remember, in the beginning of Job, there is a worldview. There is a God and creation view, which is in some ways foreign to our way of understanding what is life made of. In the ancient Hebrew worldview, they believed in God, one God. In the Christian tradition, we say one God, maker of heaven and earth, the God who created everything ex nihilo, out of nothing. In the beginning, in the Christian theology, even different than what Genesis says, in the beginning, there was nothing. Nothing. In the Genesis text, the beginnings or Genesises of, it says, in the beginning, the earth was without organization. The earth was there, and the water covered the land. There was something there. So the creation in Genesis is what God did with what was already there. In Christian theology, we talk about the fact that God created, even before that, God created everything before there was anything. So, in the Hebrew worldview, if you make a list of things, the ultimate things that exist in the world, There's God. There's all the created order, matter, if you will, and things that are antimatter. This space, the universe, the stars, everything that is out there, even the animals and the fish in the sea and the birds of the air. That's a whole category of existence. It's there, it's real. It's real. The philosophers came along at later times and said that maybe all of those things are a figment of our imagination, and that matter is not really real, that you can't prove in the philosophical sense that those things exist, so we spin them out of ourselves. Not for the Hebrews. For the Hebrews, I'll use a philosophical word, ontological. Ontological existence of matter, of things God created, and there are things, and they're real, and they're separate from us. So there's God, there's the created order, and then there are human beings. Now, human beings are a weird part of creation because we stand with kind of one foot in one reality and one foot in another. We're made of earth, but we have the breath of God in us. So we are sort of the bridge, the relationship, you will, between God, the divine, and the created order. There stands a human being. That's our blessing, and it's also our curse. But listen to what's not in that. What is not in that is a separate, opposed to God, power, evil, if you will, as a person, the devil. It's just not there. The answers for why do bad things happen to people in the world, in the book of Job, I don't know you, but you're not going to like it, that in the book of Job, the bad things happen to Job because God gets into an argument and a bet with other elements of God's self. The Satan is an element of God's personality. So I've explained this before, and I apologize if you feel like I'm going back over something that you completely understand, but if you have a 2-year-old in your house, you understand this function of the Satan, and I changed the emphasis on it so that it's spelled like Satan, but you got to think entirely different than that. In a 2-year-old, there is a Satan. And the Satan tests the parents at every stage. And it starts at 2-year-old, and it gets really intense when they get to be 16 and 17-year-old. And family systems therapists say that 17-year-olds are always testing to find out where the boundaries are. They're testing. They're always testing. They cross over the boundary to see if you'll draw the boundary, and they do that because they want to know, in the end, they want to know if you love them. They want to know if you really love me. If you tell me to be in by 10 o'clock and then I come in at 12:30 in the morning and you don't notice, I have tested your boundary and I have found that you don't really care. Now, it's very strange, right? Because what do teenagers hate most, or what do children hate most, than to be told what to do? But psychologists and sociologists will tell you, they talk about they use the language of a womb, that the circle of the womb, a child needs to be able to trust the boundaries. And they will test the boundaries. They will Satan the boundaries. They will test your ability, your willingness to sacrifice your own peace of mind in order to keep them inside a safe perimeter. And that is listen carefully, that is a satanic behavior. It's a testing behavior. They're not testing parents to make them better parents. They're testing to prove whether or not the parent really loves the child. And please hear me. I'm not talking about corporal punishment. I'm not talking about, to show your child that you love them, you have to spank them. I actually don't believe that at all. I don't think that is true. But I think there is a function of discipline, which is part of parenting. And discipline, a child who is disciplined, who's kept inside the caring, protective womb of a family and a mother and a father's care and a family's care, grows to be a person who not only learns to trust that other people really love them, but they also then learn how to love others. Okay. So that was an adventure into trying to offer a way of thinking about what happens in the realm of God in the story of Job. There is a testing. God is bragging about this man, this human being on the earth, who is so full of faith that you just can't believe it. And there's another side of God's personality that says, I wonder if that's really true. I'm not sure that's true. Maybe Job trusts me and loves me because he's a rich man and he's got a lot of kids and he knows that his life is good. And it's easy to trust when life is good. And I need to know, does he really, really trust me? Does he really love me? And so the journey of the book of Job begins. It's a challenging idea that the answer to the question of why do bad things happen to Job, I don't know why that bad things happen to you, and I don't know why bad things happen to me, but I'm going to tell you, in the book, bad things happen to Job, really, really horrible things happen to Job, because God wants to be satisfied that Job loves God and trusts God in all circumstances of life. Job's friends have never heard of such a thing, and so they just jump to assume no one would ever suffer like you're suffering, Job, unless God was trying to get you to stop doing something. I mean, what are you doing in secret, Job? What is your secret? You have a secret sin. You've got something going on because look at your life, for goodness sakes. All right, so they say in good teaching, you tell them and then you tell them what you told them. You tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. So that's why I keep repeating some of these foundational pieces of understanding this book of Job. Now, I'm not going to go back into the beauty of the poetry of Eliphaz the friend, who makes his powerful, powerful pitch to Job to please give it up. Just confess your sin and get right with God, would you? Because we can't stand this suffering that you're going through. So we're going to start at verse 6, and we're going to hear Job now in person respond. And his also it's a beautiful, beautiful poetry that summarizes Job's point of view in response to what's happening here. Then Job answered, "Oh, that my vexation were weighed and all the calamity laid in the balances. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash, for the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. Does the wild ass bray over its grass, or the ox low over its fodder? Can that which is tasteless be eaten without salt? Or is there any flavor in the juice of mallows? My appetite refuses to touch them. They are like food that is loathsome to me. Oh, that I might have my request, and that God would grant my desire. That it would please God to crush me, and that God would let loose his hand and cut me off. This would be my consolation. I would even exult in unrelenting pain, for I have not denied the words of the Holy One. What is my strength that I should wait? And what is my end that I should be patient? Is my strength the strength of stones, or my flesh bronze? In truth, I have no help, and any resource is driven from me. Those who withhold kindness from a friend forsake the fear of the Almighty. My companions are treacherous like a torrent bed, like freshets that pass away, that run dark with ice, turbid with the melting snow. In the time of heat, they disappear. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. The caravans turn aside from their course, and they go up into the waste, and they perish. The caravans of Tema look, the travelers of Sheba hope. They are disappointed because they were confident. They come here and they are confounded. Such you have now become to me. You see my calamity, and you are afraid. Have I said, make me a gift? Or from my wealth offer a bribe for me? Or save me from an opponent's hand? Ransom me from the hand of oppressors? Teach me, and I will be silent. Make me understand how I have gone wrong. How forceful are honest words. But your reproof, what does it reprove? Do you think that you can reprove words as if the speech of the desperate were wind? Will you even cast lots over the orphan and bargain over your friend? But now, be pleased to look at me, for I will not lie to your face. Turn, I pray. Let no wrong be done. Turn now, for my vindication is at stake. Is there anything wrong on my tongue? Cannot my taste discern calamity? Job may be suffering, but he is a powerful poet of defense. Many years ago, when I was in seminary, I commuted to seminary in Philadelphia, and I lived in central New Jersey, and so my commute to seminary from my house, I was working part-time as a pastor and going to school full-time. And my commute took about 2.5 hours to get there because we had to go on the south and the west side of Philadelphia, and I always had classes that started at 8 o'clock in the morning. And so I drove through this one village, and I learned after a couple days in my classes that there was a woman who also was commuting to school, and I drove right by her house. She and her husband worked at Christ Home in North Philadelphia. So I drove right past where she lived. And so I'd offered to her that if she wanted me to, I could pick her up and I could drive her in, and it would save some gas and some frustration, and we could also talk about the things that we were learning in our classes. So she thought that was a good idea, and so did I. Our classes combined, we were both first-year students in seminary. And so it was a really good experience. But as we got to know each other, she told me a little bit more about her story. She and her husband had been members of the Baptist church, and they were very happy there as a young couple and felt very part of the family, if you will, of the church. And then she got pregnant, and they were excited about the birth of their child. And when the child was born, there was severe birth defects. The child had hydrocephalia, and I only know enough just to get it wrong, but my understanding is that there is a kind of a monitoring valve that keeps a balance of fluid in the head and in the brain. and excess fluid is sent down through the body system. It's a fluid circulation system, and sometimes in a birth defect, the canal that allows that control of the brain fluid doesn't work. And so it can cause an infant's head to swell. It is an alarming disease. Research today has given us all kinds of medical solutions. They can put shunts in now, and they can create artificial channels. But it was, even with the shunt, it was a trial, to say the least. And so here they are, this young man and woman with this child that has this serious birth defect. And as I got to know this person, she told me with great difficulty how she had learned that the community of the church could not handle her suffering. It could not handle it. Her friends stopped coming to see her. The pastor appeared evidently unable to look at this child. She needed help. She really needed a lot of help. I think at the time she had another child. And so she expected, like for everything else that happened in their church, that their community of their church would band together behind her and help her to cope. Churches do this. You know, we take meals, we offer to come and visit, we ask, is there anything that we could do? And very early on, with the news of the birth of her child, who she dearly loved, who others could not look at, they began to isolate themselves away from her. And at one point she began to call them on it. She began to say, as Job says here, you know, she began to use her words to speak against the wind, the cold wind that she felt that was blowing against her. What's going on? Why are you are treating me like as if I somehow have done something wrong? You can't, it's my child. My suffering is great enough, but you can't even suffer being with me when I'm taking care of my child. You can't even look upon my child. You can't even, it was a long time before she could even find the words to describe what was happening. That her community of dear friends, people that she loved, her own family, were shunning her. A behavior that is used, in community to punish. The ultimate punishment for a human being is solitary confinement, isolation. We are such social creatures. We are social creatures. Even if you prefer being alone, in the end, you're still a social creature because you're a human being. And when people really want to punish, when they want to punish someone in a way that really, really hurts, you put them in a room and isolate them from all human contact. She was being shunned. And so then on top of the heartache on behalf of her child that she loved and the endless surgeries that the child was going through, she was being removed from her community. It wasn't an outward plan. It wasn't something somebody said, hey, let's just do this, but the effect was the same. This is what Job is talking about. Right now, be pleased to look at me, for I will not lie to your face. Teach me why you're doing this, and I'll be silent and listen. Make me understand how I have gone wrong. How forceful are honest words. You are like, I'm learning, Job says, you are like, as a friend, you're like a chunk of ice, which is good in the hot season because it can cool your drinks and preserve your food. But when the heat is up, you melt. You're like snow that as it begins to melt, it turns black on the surface. You are proving in your relationships to me to be of no value whatsoever. You're like a caravan of help that gets lost in the desert and dries up in the heat. You have become this to me. You see my calamity and you are afraid. You see my calamity and you are afraid. He says, what have I asked of you? Have I asked you to do anything for me? I have not. Have I offered you to take from your wealth and bribe someone to relieve me? I have not done that. Have I asked you to save me, to heal me? I have not. Have I asked you to give money to ransom me from my suffering? I have not. What has Job asked for? What does Job want? What does he need in his hour of incredible suffering? He needs someone to be with him. He needs someone to be with him. So all of a sudden, all these highfalutin philosophical discussions of where does evil come from, and why is it because of human behavior? All those ethical, moral, discussions go away. And what is presented as the jewel of reflection for this particular part of the scripture is how faithful are we to people who go through difficult times? Listen, it's one thing to be poor, and it's hard. It's very hard. You lose your job, you don't have any income, and then you don't have any food. But what makes hard unbearable is when shame is applied on top of the circumstance. So the question and the discussion of this book, this part of Job, in chapter 6, is no longer, why is this happening to me? Job, in some ways, doesn't care why it's happening to him. He's not interested in the why, the big why question. He's white knuckling it. He's just like, I'm going to get through this, and I'm not going to believe for a moment that somehow this is happening to me because I didn't have enough trust in God. That's just not part of his inquiry. My friend who commuted with me to seminary didn't actually spend a lot of her waking hours asking, why has this happened to my daughter? Why has this happened in my life? Why me, oh God? I mean, I'm sure there were days, especially in the beginning, she loved her child. She loved her daughter. And her daughter was expected to die very young, and she did not. The surgeries allowed her to survive. She may still be alive today, against all odds. But the one thing that was undeniable, the one thing that in the conversations with her that just poured forth, sometimes in her tears as we rode along to seminary, was, I love my daughter. I love my daughter, and she is a gift to me. So why do these things happen? Not her question, not Job's question. It is not Job's question. The biggest question Job has is, what in the world is wrong with my friends? It's one thing to have a theology and understanding that shows that God, somehow in God's self, sends Satan to test our faith. Job, he doesn't appear aware of that wager. But it's okay with Job. He takes it at face value. And that's why I use the saying that I learned first, this very profound saying that comes out of, I think, comes out of the 12-step movement, which is, you'll have this. You will have this. I love it because it puts up a roadblock, it puts up a snowplow in front on both sides of people who want to explore the why of life, and then go on and on and on in a hand-wringing about why. Most people who are in the middle of real long-term suffering are not really all that wrapped up in the issues of why. They're more wrapped up in the issues of how and what now. What now? That's, in my understanding of it too, it's part of what the transformation from addictive behavior into sobriety is about. That's the transformation that takes place. The drug addict, the alcoholic, the compulsive person is filled with the pain of why. Why is my life like this? Why do I have so much pain? And the pain is so profound that they do pain management. It's not good pain management. The drugs that you take, the alcohol that you drink, is usually drink it to cover up some kind of pain, psychological or physical. And it works for a while, but the problem is it's a law of diminishing returns. The more you drink now to make you feel okay, you'll have to drink twice that 2 weeks from now in order to feel the same okay. It's bad pain management. And it's usually driven by the why. It's driven by, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And Job's friends are no help because they are propounding the why. Come on, Job. If you've got to dig into why this is happening to you. Job himself is not interested in that. He really just says, today is a really rotten day and I got to get through it. I got to figure out how to get through this. And then, of course, in his most intense part of his poetry, he says, listen, maybe I don't have to get through this. I just like God to crush me. Could you just put an end to my life today and we'll be good, God? We'll be good. There's no probing of the why or the cause. There isn't. And in the 12-step movement, the step towards sobriety is an acceptance. It's all about acceptance. You will have this. What's the pain in your life? The pain in your life is your parents didn't love you, or your father was abusive of you, or your spouse cheated on you, or the things that happen in life. You're going to spend a lot of time wringing your hands trying to answer the questions that can't be answered about why? Or do you want to just accept it has happened? It's happened. And you can deal with it. And even when you feel that you can't deal with it, you'll find that you can deal with it if you stop isolating yourself and thinking that you're the most unique person in the world because of all that's happening to you, and you open yourself up to a friend. To a friend who will be with you. Just be with you. Just be with you. Job says to his friends, why? Why, with all the suffering that I'm going through, and with the strength that I have, I'm not spending my days wringing my hands in searching out the questions of why are these things happening. I just want to get through the day. Or I just want an end. Just let it end. Let my life end. Now, a lot of people think that, this in the story is Job's failure. I don't agree. I don't agree at all. Job's words about let this day, I wish the day I was conceived had never been on the calendar. I wish my birthday would vaporize as a date. I see them not as Job giving up in his faith in God. I see him relying entirely on his relationship to God and his acceptance, which says, okay, look, if it's my lot to die, let it happen, will you? Please? Because I'm in a lot of pain. I'm in a lot of pain. That's what goes on in the meetings, in the rooms. People get together and they sit in a circle and they take turns, and sometimes one speaker speaks a lot, or sometimes it's just everybody speaking a lot, and basically they're saying, I'm in a lot of pain. I've had a lot of painful things that have happened, and I need you as my friends to know that it's real, that I'm feeling this pain. And one rule in the 12-step groups, which makes them work, they call it no crosstalk. When someone shares what's going on in their life, you be quiet. You don't tell somebody else how to cope with what's happening in their life. If they're here in this room, in this circle, and they're opening up their pain and their difficulty and their anger, their frustration, and they're offering out, your job is to sit still in the circle and pay attention and imagine and listen and care for that person. That is the answer to the only question that really matters in life. How will we now live? How will we live? I don't know. It's just amazing, this intuitive response that comes flying out of us as human beings in our willingness to shame people in relationship to the difficulties they have in their life. Job makes it clear it's just not helpful, and you're not friends. You're not friends. Verse 28, be pleased to look at me. Look at me. I think by this time Job was unlookable. You couldn't look at him. You had to look away. You had to look away. That's at least what you would think. You had to look away. I only have association with this through things like movies and imaginations, but when someone is horribly wounded in a battle in war, and they come home and they're disfigured, part of their face is missing, or they're missing an arm and a leg on one side, and one of the things that is just is a very strange part of how we move on in this society, that those of us who have our faces intact and everything we cannot look at. Now, we can stare when the other person is looking away. We can stare in a way that is not helpful at all. But Job says, look at me. Look at me. You can't even look at me, and you're my friends. I will not lie to your face. Turn, I pray. And I think he means leave. Just get away from me. For I will not lie to your face. Turn, I pray, and let no wrong be done. Turn now. My vindication is at stake. Meaning, if you can just shut up, close your mouth, and leave. At least then, in the middle of everything else that's going on in my life, at least you won't bring your bad behavior here and make me cope with it. Just go. Just go. Is there any wrong on my tongue? Am I saying anything that you don't understand? Because if you stay here, you bring more pain to me in my life. Wow. I'm going to read on in chapter 7. Do not human beings have a hard service on earth? And are not their days like the days of a laborer? This is Job continuing. Isn't life hard enough? Like a slave who longs for the shadow, and like a laborers who look for their wages, so I am allotted months of emptiness, and nights of misery are appointed to me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I rise? But the night is long, and I am full of tossing until dawn. My flesh is clothed with worms and dirt, and my skin hardens and then breaks out again. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and they come to their end without hope. Remember that my life is a breath. My eye will never again see good. The eye that beholds me will see me no longer. And while your eyes are upon me, I shall be gone. As the cloud fades and vanishes, so those who go down to Sheol do not come up. They return no more to their houses, nor do their places know them anymore. Therefore I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I the sea or the dragon that you set a guard over me? When I say, my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint. Then you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions, so that I could choose strangling and death rather than this body. I loathe my life. I would not live forever. Let me alone, for my days are a breath. What are human beings that you make so much of them, that you set your mind on them? Visit them every morning, test them every moment. Will you not look away from me for just a while? Let me alone until I swallow my spittle. If I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of humanity? Why have you made me your target? Why have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity? For now I shall lie in the earth. You will seek me, but I shall not be. So Job has finished his eloquent speech to his friends, and now he turns to a conversation with God. And he blends his own experience of pain in life with the futility of all human life. And I want to say he has this phrase in verse 9 where he says, as the cloud fades and vanishes, those who go down to Sheol do not come up. I want to be clear. It's really important to be clear to me on this, because there's just so much, let's just throw it all together and say it means the same thing. Sheol is a place where the dead go. It is not hell. It implies no punishment. It is actually a place of rest. It's a place where it's all done. It's finally done. And in your mercy, our life is over. Grant us a holy lodging, a rest at the last. Sheol is the place of rest. It is down, it is in the ground, because that's where we put the bodies. The bodies, lives of people come to an end. And they are in the ground. You cannot see them any longer because they're not here. There is a usage in Hebrew understanding of life of this word spirit, the ruah, but this is not the Greek concept of the true being is a spiritual being. Human beings are earth-bound beings. We live incarnate. We are in bodies. The spirit is the breath. It's actually the breath. It's the ruah. There are stages of determining when a person is dead, and when a person is dead is when they're not breathing anymore. The ruah, the spirit, is gone from them. That just means they don't breathe anymore. Then we move to the heartbeat. The heartbeat isn't beating, and so they're gone. And then we now use brain waves. It's all bound up in the body. So there's no spirit that is released that heads off to the skies when the body is buried. The person comes to an end. Job is aware, in some ways, of the blessing of the end of a life. And he's arguing with God. He's saying, look, you watcher of humanities, really, if you're going to examine my life, I mean, you can say, wow, Job is really angry with God right now. There's no sin in anger, my friends. I might just repeat that over and over again. There's no sin in anger. The sin or the brokenness of relationship doesn't come because you're angry. In fact, sometimes relationships require anger. An honest and true relationship sometimes means you need to show that you are angry at the person that is on the other end of a living relationship. Anger is a part of relationships. We fear anger because sometimes in our anger, it leads to behavior which is a violation of the relationship. Shall I repeat that? We get all mixed up sometimes. And we think that anger is the sin. By and large, as a human being, I oriented into the world as a very passive person. So people will say, you're a very nice person. And the reason is because I don't readily show anger. I don't. I want to more, and I'm working on trying to embrace what I'm telling you, is that showing anger is actually a part of a natural relationship because things happen in relationships that make you angry. And then you need to express it. You need to say, hey, ouch, that really hurt, or, you know what, I'm really angry right now. That's all part of relationship. Look at the relationship between God and Moses. God gets angry at Moses, and Moses gets angry at God. It's all part of relationship. It's in there. And some of us grow up in households where people weren't comfortable with anger. And I get that. But let's not rework the theology or God's opinion about anger and say, well, anger is bad. Anger is not bad. It's not. It's healthy. And Job is angry. He's angry at God. He says, look at you. What are you? You just look down at us? You're up there with a big tablet trying to see how we behave? And he has this phrase which sounds confusing because the whole premise of the book is that Job doesn't have these transgressions. He doesn't have these failures. That on God's tablet up in heaven, it should be blank in terms of Job's failures. But Job says, look, okay, have I failed you somehow? Have I somehow, God, failed you? Then why don't you? Because we have this relationship, God, why don't you forgive me? And let's get on with it. Job is pushing. He's pushing. He is not failing in faith. He is actually exercising his faith. You don't fail in relationships when you express and learn to express your true feelings. You are succeeding in relationship. Even if your true feelings are that you're angry or you're upset or whatever, that's the full rainbow, if you will, of the range of emotions that exist in a living relationship. Job is here showing that what is said of him is actually true. This is a man who trusts God. Moses was a man who trusted God. And one of the signs of it is that they shake their fist at God. And they say, what is the matter with you? What are you doing? The psalmist at one point, and we'll read this when we finally leave Job, the psalmist says, have you fallen asleep? Do we need to go out and get pots and pans and bang them to wake you up to our human situation here? Because you appear to have fallen asleep and you are not aware of the suffering or the concern that is going on in our lives. The biblical view is that is something that happens in a relationship when people trust God. Wow. Job has finished a scathing indictment of his friends. And when he's finished, with the next breath, he turns toward God. You should forgive me. If you've got something against me, God, I don't think you do, but if you've got something against me, just get over it. Okay? Just get over it. Because in a few days or a few weeks, I'm going to be dead. I'm going to be lying in Sheol. And you won't be able to find me. Because I'll be sound asleep. My life will be over. Everything that's going to happen will have happened. And there's nothing else yet that can happen because I'll be in Sheol. I'll be sound asleep. Earlier in the chapters before, Job fantasizes about how he'll be sleeping with the good people and the bad people. We'll all be down there together. And the really cool thing is we won't feel any pain. And we'll be able to get a good night's sleep, which he can't get right now because he goes to sleep. He lays down to sleep and he gets these dreams and visions. I think he's just really confident that when you get into the sleep of the dead and you're in Sheol, you don't dream anymore, so you won't have these terribly torturing visions and nightmares that teach him to loathe the day because it doesn't go fast enough, and then he loathes the night because he can't sleep. Now, we've come to the end of chapter 7, which is, it's a kind of a bookend because we have had Eliphaz, the friend, has come and laid out his case. And then Job responds, and responds profoundly. And then Job also then makes his petition to God to say, you know what, can you just quit? If nothing else, can you just stop whatever you're doing because I don't understand it? And can you just, have you made me a target? Job almost seems to be suspecting that there's something up. This wager, this bet that went on in God's range of personality. Job is on to God and says, have you made me a target? Have I become a burden to you somehow? All right, so we're ending with chapter 7, a very honest comment from Job, but this is going to be the end of our work in Job. Next week, when we come back, we're going to skip on and we're going to start reading from Psalm 1. And we're going to do a little work in what the Psalms are, but we're going to be moving on because, feel free. If you want to read on in Job and read, you'll see that most of the themes that we have covered, though, are just rehearsed over and over and over again. I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just saying beyond chapter 7, the rereading of it in a format like this, I'm just not sure that you'll stay with me. So read it. If you have some questions or further things that you want me to comment on with you, you can send them to me in an email at revlouis@aol.com. revlouis@aol.com. And I'll write back to you or we can engage further. But for now, we're going to leave it at the end of chapter 7, and we'll leave the other verses and the other chapters up to 45. And next week, we'll pick up with the reading of the Psalms and continue on our read through the Bible. I'm excited that we've made it this far and that we'll be having some wonderful reading of the Psalms during the Advent season because a lot of our hymns and poetry of life and its beauty and also its tragedy come from the words of these Psalms, these poets that many of them are attributed to David, whether they actually are Psalms of David or not. Sometimes they're clear that they're not. They were written in times after the time of David, but they're attributed to David because David was evidently a musician and a man who liked poetry. Okay, my friends, I thank you for your attention and for your partnership in this journey. I don't know what day or time you've listened into this. I know some people can't sleep at night, so they turn this on and they're watching these Bible studies late at night. Good for you. I hope they put you to sleep. But in the meantime, I hope that in your own journey of your deep thoughts and prayers and conversations, that your relationship with God will be strengthened, and that your relationship with yourself will be strengthened, and that you will hold on through difficult times, and that you will be good friends to each other as we go through this life. God bless you. I'll see you next week.